Alright, so I decided to do another video to show how to use the bore gauge. This is pretty tricky. So if you saw my last post, I got this bore gauge from Amazon. It was like 50 bucks or something like that. It wasn't very expensive. Sorry about the zoom there. And I figured, why not? This is what the workshop manual calls out. So thankfully it came with instructions in English, believe it or not. But essentially you set the bore gauge up and you mount the dial indicator on the top. Tells you how to do that. There's a special way. And down at the bottom here is the business end. So the metal part on your right there is a measured shaft, and that gets mounted inside, and that gets screwed down, and that doesn't move. And then over here, that little dot in the center there, that's the actual measuring device. So I'll show you. If you press on that dot down there, you get deflection on your dial indicator. So pretty sensitive. Obviously you're looking at pretty small increments. So what you have to do is know what the diameter of your bore is, and then if you'll notice on the case, you have several different size shafts that you're going to use there, or anvil is what it calls out in the little sheet there. So I picked the 2.81, and what this is going to do is going to make the tool a little bit bigger than the cylinder bore. So now my cylinders have been bored out 0.020. The kicker with this is that if you look, I'm going to walk with me here. Oh, I covered the chassis, by the way, just to keep her nice and clean. If you look in the workshop manual, there's a table here on your cylinder bores, and there's grades F, G, and H depending on the manufacturer of the pistons. And you can see there's different manufacturers of pistons there. So I have no idea what the grade is. I couldn't find any stampings on the block. Maybe I just am not looking in the right spot or what. So I picked the middle, picked G, and it says 2.787 and 2.784. They're actually vice versa there. And since it's 20 thousandths over, it would actually be 2.7487. I think I misspoke there. So 2.7487. So I got my micrometer. Another Harbor Freight guy here. Got a micrometer. Adjusted it to make sure that it was zeroed out at 2 inches with the little tool that it comes with. And I set it for, it's not going to focus at all. That's about 2.748. You got to trust me there. I know it's blurry. And then you take this tool and you set the bore gauge in between there, rock it back and forth to zero it out. And then with it in the bore gauge, you zero the micrometer, or excuse me, the dial indicator. So you can see here, because it's not in there, it's about a negative, I don't know, 46 or something like that. To the left would be negative. That's the way I'm reading it. So when it was in the micrometer, however, this did zero out, and you adjust right there with that little guy, you loosen that up, and you can turn the face. So that zeroed it up. So then, once you get that zero up, the micrometer, you don't need that guy anymore. Then you come in, and you're going to stick the bore gauge down in the bore. Now you can see this little tool here with the wheels. Looks like a little trike or something like that. That whole thing slides. I'll show you here in a second. And I'm going to change my vantage point here, so hold on. Alright, so now I have the bore gauge in the top of the cylinder. And I'm going to show you real quick here. So this whole carriage, I guess you could say, slides, and these wheels, they don't turn, but they are obviously circular. So what they'll do is they allow a drift inside your cylinder wall. So slide that back a little bit, set the bore gauge down into the cylinder, and what I did is I went all the way to the bottom the first time around. So you go all the way to the bottom, or close to it, get a reasonable spot, and then make sure I'm zeroed in here, and you can still see. I'll zoom in a little bit. Zero it up here. I don't know if you can see that, but there you go. Alright, so now if you look at that, and what you do is you slowly rock it back and forth. And when that needle, you can see it start to go negative here. So I rock it the other way, it starts to go positive, and it stops. And then it'll start to go negative again. So right about there is your 0 mark. So that allows, now you know that your bore gauge is straight up and down, perpendicular to the cylinder. So essentially that's what the measurement is. So in my case it's positive 0.010, or excuse me, positive 0.0010 because it's 0.0005 increments. So I know now that at the bottom of this gauge, and I'm running the bore gauge parallel to the cylinder, or parallel to the engine, I know that I've got positive 0.000, or excuse me, positive 0.0010. This is a lot of zeros there, sorry about that. So then I jotted that down, and I made my way up the rest of the cylinder wall and did it all. And then I rotated it 90 degrees, and I did the same thing. And I went through all the pistons to do, or excuse me, all the cylinders to do that. And what that's going to give me is my difference from what I've set the bore gauge to be. So then with that difference, now I can figure out what the actual size of my cylinder wall is up and down throughout the motor. So that's basically how you use the bore gauge. I've seen other applications where you use the bore gauge for measuring the main bearings. So the crankshaft, the main bearings, I think I'm going to try that. So you essentially put the bearing together without the crankshaft in, including the bearing, you torque it down, and then you measure it using the same kind of method. We'll see how that goes. Again, these have been machined over 20 thousandths. I don't know what they're supposed to be. You can see that they're not in the greatest of shape. There's no flash in here. But I did get a brush to a honing brush to make them all nice and purty and give me a crosshatch. So there you go. Hopefully it makes sense, and hopefully that this video doesn't make you sick. Thanks.